Hi everyone, Zachary here from Confucian Qigong. Today I'd like to talk to you about Confucian Qigong, or Confucian paradigms applied to your Qigong practice. As a disclaimer, before we begin this video is meant just as a nutshell or taste of what the system is. In no way is this meant to replace lectures or books because, again, there's vast information on Confucianism in general. So like the Buddhist Qigong video or the Taoist Qigong video, this is just a very rough nutshell. I'll try and pack as much information as I can in a short video. However, if you are really interested in this type of work or just Confucianism in general, pick up a book and go read. So with that said, let's begin what Confucian Qigong is. In order to understand Confucian Qigong, we have to understand a few things, being the man himself, being Confucius, and the Confucian philosophy. So with that, who is Confucius? Confucius was a person that was born in the spring and autumns period in China. Specifically, his birth is at 551 to 479 BCE. That's his lifespan between those two time periods listed. And when he was bouncing around between state to state, he was more or less vouching for this philosophy of how rulers should be with the people. And it was more about social responsibility, social harmony, and more or less this group dynamic attitude with Confucius. And in order for a ruler to rule wisely, he had to work on himself purely, which is actually something that's more emphasized in Confucianism than any other philosophy in China. The exceptions may be Taoism and Buddhism, but they go in a different way of actually how you interact with that. All these systems I just said do work on this idea of you need to take responsibility for yourself and you need to work on yourself, but the Confucian spin on it would be much more you need to do this in groups or you need to do this with people. Because without the people, how can you have more of this feedback mechanism? So with that understanding, Confucius then, while he was bouncing around all these states, was really trying to work on this social etiquette, social responsibility, as I mentioned earlier, but he was also a collector of knowledge when he was bouncing place to place, because he was actually born from an aristocratic family, which then got poor. So he would be termed a shi, which is this person that was from a noble birth or heritage, but in the present moment has nothing, or has not as much power as they did before. So he did have this formal education in what this Chinese philosophy or these more ruling class ideas were. But he wanted to kind of spread this throughout all of China at the time. So when we look at Confucian Qigong then, we always have to consider a few things. First, it's always working on yourself from an emotional standpoint, because from a Confucian standpoint, the only reason you have issues is because you don't take responsibility for the things you've done to other people. You don't account them, you just let them happen. There's no mindfulness in it. And with no mindfulness, that means there's no or there's no intention. So when we start doing Confucian Qigong then, it's more of this, well, how do I clear my emotions because of social influences that are always around me, unless you're living alone, completely in a forest, which is what the Taoists did. But you're always if you're in society, you need to always interact with some person at some point, is the Confucian idea. So that's a proper time to do cultivation work. But before we can even get to that point of doing this real life 24/7 interaction of more or less cleaning up my own or your own stuff, we have to really declutter whatever was there from years ago. So it's like, why do you have certain anger? Why do you have resentment? Why do you blame others? It starts to sound very much like psychotherapy, what we would call in the West. However, they were doing this from a Chinese perspective back in the day. So they didn't have these structures of what Western psychotherapy would be. They would be using things like the 5 elements and how that interacted with your organs. So then it connects to Chinese medicine. Certain organs store certain emotions, and then my social behaviors are actually deemed or predetermined because of my emotions, which are actually things from the past that kind of made me who I am now. So any illnesses I have are actually things that I brought onto myself, in terms of I chose this because I chose to feel this way, which then acts almost like a poison. If I just were to release it, or if I were to forgive, or if I were to take social responsibility and really take it on fully, it would pass like the wind, but it's still here. So from a Confucian Qigong perspective then, we have to look at, well, why are you holding on to things? Why aren't you forgiving certain people? Things like this. And again, you can see how this group dynamic starts to actually really have an influence in terms of this paradigm of Confucianism. How do I relate to others? Because how I relate to others is very much how I'm going to relate to myself, or at least parts of myself. So how do I clear these things up? And it's not very much talked about in many circles of Qigong that there is Confucian Qigong. Most of the time they say, well, Confucian Qigong is used by the scholars, and they just sat down and meditated and breathed. There is much more of a sophisticated system when it comes to Confucian Qigong, which is documented in the Analects and various other Confucian textbooks. However, you have to decode them and understand them from historical and even have a background in Qigong to really extrapolate what's there. And then you can actually start applying it. So there is quite a bit of information on Confucianism out there if you were to look. The extrapolation of Confucianism into your Qigong practice, which I kind of talked about in here briefly, is mainly working on your own emotional, psychological issues, and then really resolving them, accepting them, but you have to figure out what those social influences were. So, for example, do you have certain resentments or blames or things that are emotionally attached to your mother which aren't positive? Or your father? Or your brothers and sisters? Or your cousins? Or even your spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend? How about your friends? From a Confucian Qigong perspective, it would be expected that you would work through all of these relationships before you can start releasing the things that are needed. Even if you work on one relationship to improve it, you'll improve yourself, because from a Confucian perspective, it starts with you and it starts with the family. If you can more or less work the relationships from yourself, your family, friends are easy. And then never mind, say, your colleagues at work or your boss or any other people around you. But it starts from a still point being who you are, decluttering, and then expanding outward to your closest relations, and then to more of your external relations. All relations from a Confucian Qigong perspective have an impact on you. So to consider it, and to analyze it, and to release what issues are there, will not only transform yourself, but will transform the people around you. And this is ultimately, from a Confucian perspective, what we're aiming for. To transform the family means to transform the country, and then to transform the world. But it all starts at you. So this is a brief summary of what Confucian Qigong is. If you're interested in more information like this, go to torontoqigong.com or subscribe to the video below.